All right, thank you very much and welcome again. So this is our final class for watercolors. My name is Mike Southern and I've been doing these classes now for a little over a month, and we started with acrylics, have worked our way into watercolors for the last 5 classes, and this will be the final watercolor class for a little while. I'm sort of doing a whole series of painting demos, so eventually we'll swing back around to watercolor, but we're going to give it a rest for a little while. Just so you know, the next class is going to be a continuation of what we started in acrylics, but I'm going to be working in oils specifically. So I'm going to be combining the start of the acrylic painting that was begun, I don't know, it was about 3 weeks ago now or 2 weeks ago, and then apply some oil paints to that acrylic underpainting that we did. So that's coming up day after tomorrow on Monday. So I hope you all can sign up for those and check those out. And we'll get that supply list for you when that class comes. But first, we have to get the supply list for what we're doing today. So we'll just go to that. This is sort of the standard issue watercolor supply list. You're going to need a series of colors: white, yellow, ochre, umber, ultramarine blue, brilliant red, lemon yellow. All of those will work. That's the 3 primaries, and then some earth colors. The primaries can be different types of blue. You can do a cyan blue or a Prussian blue or a cerulean blue. It doesn't matter as long as it's sort of a solid definitive blue. Same thing with red and yellow. Cadmium, red and yellow both will work. Naphthol red is another one. What's another one? Hansa yellow is one that I've used before. Anything that looks really bright yellow or bright red or bright blue will work. And if you've got other colors to supplement that, that's awesome as well. Paper towels, you're going to need water in a container. I actually have 2 containers of water today because I'm going to be using some ink. And I will need to rinse off my my brushes and, you know, in 2 separate containers because they've got kind of 2 different pigment types. So I try to keep those separate. So if you've got a couple of water containers, that would be great. And for those of you that were here yesterday, I believe this thing is now floating around in the chat. If I'm not mistaken, the watercolor techniques handout. So if you want to search for that and maybe download it or print it out, if you're wondering about that, that's something that we've rounded up since last class, and we're going to kind of piggyback on what we did yesterday in today's classes. So today's class, what we want to do is I want to combine different techniques with watercolor. I'm going to use pen and ink. I'm going to use just straight ink, kind of with a brush. I'm going to use some watercolor pencils, oil-based pencils. I've got some pastels. And then there's a few other techniques that I'll throw in here too. But the goal, really, this is kind of a bit of a free-for-all. And to be honest, you guys are the first to see this particular demo. So if I can show you this. So this is what we did yesterday. My goal today, this was sort of a little bit of the frisket, and then I used some crayon here to kind of, actually it was a wax candle, to use it as a to resist the watercolor that I laid over top of it. And then did some what's called thirsty brush, where you're taking a wet brush and kind of working back into it to create some texture there. This was the salt. By the way, the salt turned out really well, I think. Let's just get, yeah, it's got a really nice texture to it. Lots of sort of different color variations, you know, sort of a pinkish, and then sort of a light blue, and then the purple around it. So it kind of creates this myriad of textures and colors. And then this is the dried version of what we did yesterday with the saran wrap over top of it. So all of this was fun, but it didn't really do much in terms of making an image. So my goal today is to use all of the stuff that I have in addition to watercolor and use watercolor to try and make this interesting. We're going to go kind of abstract with shapes and different textures and patterns and things like that. So it's a little bit of an experiment, but I think it'll be fun and we'll see how it goes. So without further ado, let's get started. And I'm going to start actually with ink. This is just regular India ink is sometimes called. You can see it's called India ink right there. These usually cost a few bucks for a little thing like this. Different brands, there's all kinds of different brands out there. This is one called Pebio. I've actually never heard of this. Is my first time. I've used it before, but it's only been this jar. This is my first jar of this. But it's easily accessible. It doesn't have to be, some of it they sell as waterproof ink. Others are water resistant. For what we're doing, probably a waterproof ink would be good because once it's set, you maybe want to ensure that it's permanent. So I'm taking a little bit of a risk, but I want to show you kind of what it has. It's got a little dropper here. So if I wanted to, I could drop ink on there. I don't want to, but I do want to show you that. So I'm just going to put that over here, put the lid that way. And I'm just going to use, I'm going to kind of divide things up into shapes. This is water-based. This is the closest thing to watercolor that's not watercolor. I mean, gouache is another type of watercolor. It's a kind of an opaque, get it over here where you can see it. But this it behaves very similarly to watercolor. It is, in terms of being water-based, it's got a lot of similarities. And I'm just going to use this to kind of draw some shapes here, maybe put a border on things. I'm going to maybe get a little bit of water on here just to thin it out a bit. But this is really potent stuff. So I'm just going to kind of make let's get a little bit more on there. Get a nice big dark shape. Just kind of create some divisions here. Get some shapes. Maybe I'll start with, and I can go over this. Anything water-based is really easy to combine with watercolor because you're sort of operating from similar places in terms of the medium that reduces it. Let me get a little bit more water on here. I'm going to thin this out and make it flow a little bit better. Ink, when you add water to it, it takes a lot of water to really reduce the darkness of ink. So I'm not too worried about losing the vibrancy here. And this is another thing too, as I've been working here a few minutes, you'll probably notice that in the previous demos, I haven't really moved my paper at all. I've had it taped down. And normally that's what I would want to do, but this being a demo and I want you to see everything. And I also want to have the ability to kind of move it around. I'm not taping this down. It would be normally something that I would do, but for a variety of reasons, I'm not. And it makes it a lot easier to mobilize my medium. I'm just going to do a nice dark outline here.
So Mike, we have a couple of questions.
Yeah, go for it. This should be a big question day. So if you got questions, have at it. I'm ready.
Feel free. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah. I will read them out to Mike. So what's the benefit of using watercolor ink?
Watercolor ink. Well, if you're combining it with watercolor, you're operating from similar starting points. Like everything's water-based. You could do like an oil-based ink, like a printmaking ink, but you would have to keep in mind that you'd probably have to let one dry before you worked into another, because oil and water don't mix and they kind of repel each other. But in terms of what I'm doing here, everything's kind of on the same footing. So I look at that as an advantage. I mean, there's times actually when you could use like an oil-based, you could use an oil-based ink. The problem with anything oil-based is it tends to dry much, much slower. So that can be a hindrance to kind of keeping up your pace and making things move a little bit. All right, so I hope that answered your question. And I'm using, this is my, you can't see it up here, but right above this one, I've got another big thing, and I'm just gonna clean anything off that's sort of inky up there, and then I'll just keep the watercolors down here.
That's actually another question we have, Mike. Can you just clean it out with water as you would with any regular watercolor, and it just all comes off? Does it work the same with the ink?
Yes, yes. Clean, this is the brush I just used. I just dipped it in the water. And it's pretty much back to the starting point. So it cleans off really easily. The reason I have two separate things of water is ink is really concentrated. It's really dark. So I don't want to put it in this. I mean, I've already got a tiny bit in there. So it's not a big deal. But just to compare, this has got like 3 times as much water, and it's already pretty darn black. So actually, why don't I just show you? I'll just show you what that paper looks like. I'll just put a little, yeah, it's actually not got too much into it, but it's a little bit gray for, almost probably 3 cups of water there. And I've just cleaned off my brush. I haven't actually dipped ink in there. I've kind of just cleaned the brush. So it's much more concentrated. So I like to keep my watercolor, bin a little bit purer than that, for lack of a better word. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is when you're combining different techniques in watercolor, you want to think about how it reacts when it's wet and how it reacts when it's dry. Do you want to put it in before you put the watercolor? Do you want to put it in after the watercolor? There's all sorts of different things that you have to take into consideration. And I want to start with colored pencil, because colored pencils are a really good way to kind of highlight things and, make, really defined lines and get a lot of bold, vibrant color. So I've got 2 pencils, 2 colored pencils, 2 red colored pencils, but they are different. And the difference is one of them is oil-based and one of them is water-based. And how do you tell them apart? They look pretty darn close. Well, the ones that you buy in the store individually, like these are, what brand are these? These are Faber-Castell, and yeah, they're both Faber-Castell, I think is how you pronounce it. And they're sold individually. So you can buy individual colored pencils. You can buy colored pencils in a set. I like to buy individual ones because they're easier to tell if they're water-based or if they're oil-based. And for the way I use them, especially with watercolor, I need to know that. And so the way I tell that is if you turn them up here, if you look at that one, you can see that's a circle at the end. And if you look at this one, it's kind of I don't know, what is that? 5 sides, 3 sides? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A septagon, a pentagon. It's got more of a straight edges all around it. So it's a different shape. The round one is oil, the O for oil, if you want to go with that way, the round O. And then this is the faceted one that has distinct angles, and that's water-based. So I am going to use the oil-based here, and then I'm going to put some water over top of it. So I'm just going to, this ink is pretty close to being dry. There's a little bit of wet spot here, but I'll just do a little pattern here. Oh geez, I'm blanking on my pen. I'll just do something like this. So everybody knows that oil and water don't mix. So I'm putting the oil down first, kind of along the same lines as what I did here yesterday with the crayon, with the wax. And when I go over that, it's going to be very similar to what happened here, except for instead of this being white, it's going to be blue. So now I've got blue. Here's a quick quiz for you. Who knows the complementary color of blue? It's kind of an advanced question. Got to know a little bit of your color wheel. Feel free
Orange.
to
I'm saying orange.
Yeah, orange, that's right. The complement of a primary color, which blue is always going to be a secondary color. So the complement of red is green and the complement of yellow is purple. So you can kind of match it up that way. So I'm going to use orange here because complementary colors complement each other for ease of understanding. And actually, I'm going to not use that same brush. I'm going to use a different one here. I'm going to go back to another Filbert brush, but one that hasn't been sullied with that black ink. So I'll just take some of this orange. And
so Mike, while you're doing that, going back to the question, the previous question, Leslie's asking for a little more clarification as to why would someone choose watercolor or the ink over like regular watercolors? What are the like pros, cons of it?
As opposed to like a black watercolor color, you know, like or a black tube, like ivory black here as an example, something like this. I assume that's the question. That was maybe the original question even. Yeah, that's a great question. And the reason is this black that's as black as you're going to ever be able to get anything with water media. It is very intense. It's you don't have to worry about like with watercolor. Oftentimes you'll put it down and the water will kind of dilute it a little bit and it gets gray. It's really hard to get a really black with watercolor. With ink, it's pretty much right out of the container. It comes really intense black. So that's why I like to use it. The one thing that you do want to keep in mind is you don't want to use ink as a watercolor. So in other words, I wouldn't mix this with my watercolors. They're not exactly the same. Like this does not have a gum Arabic base, and that's what watercolor does. Watercolor has, or ink has something different. I'm actually not entirely sure what it is, but they're not entirely compatible. So that's two reasons why you should one, keep them separate. And the advantage to me is the intensity of the black. So that's why I use it. So I hope that answered your question. I'm sorry I missed it. I missed the meaning anyway on the first time. All right.
Okay.
So this.
Sorry.
I just want to go over this really quick. So this is the oil pencil first, and then I put a wash of orange over top of it, and that kept those colors very distinct. So there's no combining of the colors. I'm sorry, go ahead. There was maybe another question.
Yes. Well, if would you mind showing the ink bottle again?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, this is just one, and there's many other types in there, but it's India ink, calligraphy ink. There's lots of different names for it, but it just any water-based ink will be, and you generally find this kind of in, if you're going to an art store, like where the graphic stuff is, like pens and pencils and things like that. You won't find it, generally speaking, in the paint section. It'll be more in the drawing or graphic section.
And is there any alternative if someone doesn't have that kind of ink for outlining?
You could use actually a Sharpie marker would work. Just a regular old Sharpie marker would give you this kind of intense black, and it'll be instantly dry. You don't have to wait for it. I've been sort of blathering here a little bit because there's a little bit of a spot here that I want to dry. But yeah, a Sharpie marker would be fine. If you've got ink, like a Speedball is another brand too. But if you've got ink that you roll out, that could work as well. The problem with that is it doesn't dry as fast. So it's going to be a little bit tacky, probably for the duration of this if we use something that rolled out. That's not as common as this kind of ink, but it would also work.
Perfect.
Okay.
And, just one last question on that ink.
Yep.
Can it be reactivated with water as watercolors are?
No, and that's a great question. Once the ink is dry, it is there forever. So I hope I'm happy with this because I don't have any choice anymore because it's there forever. If I wanted to cover this up and get it back to white, I'd probably have to come over top with some really heavy acrylic paint or something like that, or some really opaque white ink. It's a pretty permanent thing. There's water resistant ink, and then there's waterproof ink. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this is waterproof. Waterproof will never come up. Sometimes water resistant ink can kind of you can get a little bit of activation, and you know, if you remember yesterday, I took this white little slash, I took it out just by adding some water. You won't get nearly the kind of reduction in that, even if you've got a water resistant ink. So ink is much more permanent. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to use the watercolor or the water-based pencil and just show you how that works. So I'm just going to do some red. I'm going to do kind of a matching little pattern down here. The image is shaping up a little bit. Let's do something like that. And I'm not going to do the complement here. I'm going to do something a little bit more conducive to our demonstration. So first, I'm going to go over it with a little bit of water, just to show you. And let me get you a little bit closer here so you can kind of see how this is working. So I'm just going to go over it with water, and you can immediately see how the pigment in the pencil gets activated by the water. So that was water. I didn't have any pigment on there. There was nothing on here. This is a totally clean brush, no pigment in here at all. So immediately it gives me a diluted version of that red. So that's something that you have to keep in mind when you're using water-based pencils. And if you don't know what they are, sometimes you might get like a set of colored pencils, and it doesn't say whether they're oil-based or water-based in there. You can't tell from the shape. Oops, go back, come on, behave yourself. So you have to do an experiment, and the way to do that experiment is just to have a little bit of water on hand and give it a shot and see how it works. Come on, behave.
Just 1 second, guys. We'll be back. Or
Yeah.
The camera will be back in just a minute.
Yeah, come on. Didn't do this at all yesterday. It was being very nice.
Now it behaved.
It did.
Technology. This
There
happens.
we go. Oh,
Oh.
now it turns sideways. Now we're back. There. That's all right. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just putting a little bit of yellow paint over top of this to kind of give it a little bit more color variation. But you can see, this is pure. This was pure yellow that I put on here, and now that background color around those red marks that I made with the pencil have everything's turned orange because it's basically like mixing two colors together. So with water-based colored pencils, you have to be very aware that they are going to not be separate like this oil and water mix up here. When you get that water-based pencil and watercolors, they're going to mix. It's basically like mixing two watercolor colors, but in different forms. The other way that I like to use watercolor pencils is by maybe activating a little area of my drawing or my painting. So this is just sort of almost pure water here. And then I'll take the watercolor pencils, and I've got a whole special set here. This is just an old brand that I've had forever. I don't even know where I got it anymore. But these are specifically called watercolor pencils. This one that I showed you earlier, that red one from Faber-Castell, this is not, they're not explicitly called watercolor pencils, but they're essentially the same thing. I guess the difference here would be that these are designed to be used with watercolor or with, you know, some sort of water media, whereas the other ones are a little bit more, you know, you can use them just for, you know, just doing watercolor, or excuse me, doing just simple little drawings with just the watercolor. You could probably do that both, but these are probably a little bit more geared explicitly for what I'm going to do here. So this is just all wet. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to do this right in the water. And it's really nice saturated color. I think I'm drawing the state of Iowa. Kind of looks like Iowa there. There we go. Anybody from Iowa? I'm highlighting your state. There we go, sort of. Now, as a contrast, I'll just, and you can see how it's kind of leaking in there a little bit. So you get kind of that bloomy watercolor thing happening. So in many ways, these are kind of like these watercolor pencils, and really water-based pencils, colored pencils, are kind of like solid watercolors, and they're just waiting for the water to activate them. Now, if I were to use this without that water, it's still there, but that line's a little bit pebblier and not nearly as activated. I don't think that's a state, maybe Indiana. But it's a much duller color. So the water really pops these watercolor pencils. Now, if I wanted to make that more like this, I could just come in here with a wash once again and just kind of activate that green. It's much more, the colors are much more interesting when the water is applied to them, when you're using watercolor pencils. So you can kind of use it in both ways. And then you've essentially got kind of a light watercolor wash to work with just from the residual marks that you've made. So that's another way to use watercolor pencils. You can sort of get some of the color down in linear form, and then just use it as a wash if you want to. And same thing over here. If I wanted to kind of pull some of this down, I could just kind of activate it and pull it in and get kind of a light greenish color in there. And then if I wanted to add something else, you know, throw a little light color in there, keeping in mind I'm trying to make this interesting. So doing a little complementary color arrangement, getting a little bloom of color. Just try that. Oh no, disaster in Iowa. There we go. So we'll just let that bloom, see what happens there. Okay, so there's a few colored pencil interactions there between these colors. Or between the two mediums there. This one's all pretty much dry. So I think this will be a good opportunity to, let's see if there's any other pencils that I've missed here. I think that's pretty much all that I want to do. Yeah, I think that'll do it. So what I'd like to do now is bring out the pastels. And these are old pastels. I got these gifted to me from, I don't even know who, but they're just sort of standard pastels. And if you've ever used pastels before, you know that pastels are really, they're like chalk. They're really crumbly. So if you put them down, I'll just do two different ways. I'll do it into a dry area, and then we'll interact it with some wet area. Well, first thing I'll do is I'll put it over a dry area. So let's say I want this blue to get a little more intense. I can kind of come over here and pop that blue out. Maybe I'll just do it kind of halfway. So it sort of changes that color a little bit. They're very opaque, meaning they're very, you can't see through them. So they're really strong jolt of color. So it's gonna kind of dominate wherever you put these marks. And you can see, let's just try it in the wet. I really don't do it like this very much. This is still a little damp. So it's got kind of a nice flow to it. It doesn't really change the color. I mean, the difference between the watercolor pencils and this is the colors are pretty much the same if it's dry or if it's wet with pastel. I personally do not like to mix watercolor and pastel while watercolor is wet. And I'll show you why, because it kind of creates this, let's do another color. I'm trying to keep things interesting here. Let's do.
So Mike,
Yeah.
What difference would there be between oil pastels and chalk pastels?
Yes, that's a great question as well. I actually don't have any oil pastels, but oil pastels being oil and watercolor being water, there will be a little bit more of the water and oil don't mix dynamic going on. But they're still kind of crumbly and chalky. So it's like, it would be like having, I don't know, like an oil-based dust in water. It would still be there and it would kind of float around on top. But the stuff that really kind of adhered to the paper would probably stay put. But because it's so loose and crumbly, you'd still get some of that mixing of the two elements, the watercolor on one hand and the oil pastel on the other. With these pastels being, kind of neutral, they're not really, I guess they would be water-based. I'm not really sure what they are. They're kind of just like a talc. So it's more like it's dirt, and that's what's going to mix with your water. So it's kind of muddy. That's why I don't really like it too much. So let's do a color here that's gonna, let's do orange again. Got a little orange over there. Maybe we'll balance it out, get a little triad of orange going on here. So I'm just going to put this orange wash over this, and it's definitely mixing. And if you look on my brush, you can actually see the little chunks of that yellow that I had down there. So it is kind of intensifying it. This one is probably the best looking mix I've ever had of this combination. But the problem I found with this mix is it just looks chalky. It just looks like chunks of the pastel are kind of floating in the water, and they don't always mix very well. The other problem that you're going to have when this all dries, that powder from the pastels doesn't absorb into the paper like the watercolor does. So it will often sit on the top, and you still can smear it. So if you're worried about that, you'll probably have to treat it with some sort of, varnish spray or something so it adheres. For pastel artists, about that spray, and you would need to do that if you had that element on here. So the way I like to use pastel with watercolor is when it's dry. So if you remember last time I did sort of this texture in here, I'm going to try and sort of highlight that a little bit more. So this is dry. This is just straight pastel. I'm just going to kind of rub over the top of it. It's pretty subtle. I can see it pretty well, but yeah, it's just sort of adding a little bit of depth to the color. It's not so uniformly that brown color. Let me see if I can get a close up on that. So it's just adding kind of a nice little, and I'm not pressing too hard. I really want it to kind of go over the top and not be sort of a uniform yellow and cover everything that I've already got up. I'm using the texture of the paper to kind of accent that texture that I've created. So something like that. That's kind of a nice layering effect there. So that's a good way to use your pastel and watercolor without it mixing and sort of cross-contaminating. Having said that, I'm still looking at that one that I did earlier, that one up here, and I really like the intensity of that color now. So I may have jinxed myself and made that much more appealing than I had thought it was going to be, but we'll wait till it's dry and see how it plays out. Okay, what else do we got here? Pens. These little pigmented ink pens. So this is essentially like this ink in pen form. And this is a really common use of watercolor and another technique. These pens, they're by Staedtler. They are straight black, but you can often get them like in walnut color or different colored primary colors, but they tend to come in black. And you'll notice, let me just get them all out of here and see it better. So they come in different sizes, 0.7, 0.5, 0.3, 0.1. The smaller the number, the smaller the size of the nib. So I'll just make a few marks with these. And so you can see, so that's 0.7. Let's get a little closer.
So Mike, do you know if these pens are water-based?
I think they're waterproof. So let's see if it says, yes, permanent. So you're looking for, yes, waterproof. Waterproof permanent would be ideal for these, because if they're not, if you were to go over this with watercolor, it could sort of bleed that black everywhere. And you know, if you want that to happen, it's not an issue. But if you want it to, you know, sort of remain separate, then you'll be looking for the waterproof ones, and these are waterproof. So 0.7, 0.5, 0.3, and 0.1. So obviously different widths here. And so I'm just going to go around and kind of make some design stuff. I'm going to sort of tie things together here. And then after that, I just want to try, I've probably got about 15 minutes or so left. I'm just going to go around and use a variety of different things here to try and finish this image off.
So Mike, would you recommend using alcohol markers?
I honestly don't know about alcohol markers, but my guess is they would work. Try them, see what happens. Watercolor is really versatile. I mean, there's a lot of things that people try with in conjunction with watercolor. So, and there's a lot of them that I haven't used together, so I've never done that. Feel free to report back on how it goes. Or at the end, we can highlight you and see how it looks. So maybe up here, I'll just do some intricate little, this is the 0.3, just adding a little bit. The pens are the one thing that I have seen used in conjunction with watercolors the most. You know, that they'll start with the watercolor, sort of define different shapes with big sort of splashy color areas, and then kind of firm it up with this. Let's get a little closer there. There we go. Make it more interesting. Let's go down here, maybe do this area a little bit.
What about, would you recommend using these pens with acrylic?
I don't see that as much. And the reason why watercolor is so versatile with other media is because it's so transparent. So with acrylic paint, for the most part, is pretty opaque. Like once you put acrylic paint down, you've got acrylic paint. You don't have like this transparency. So if I wanted to do some drawing in here with a pen, it would show up really easily. It'd be a lot harder. And also the mostly what you're painting on in watercolor is paper, and paper is really receptive to a lot of different mediums. You can do paintings in acrylic on paper, but you have to treat it with gesso first, and that's not the most receptive surface for writing, for drawing, and sort of the more pencil oriented and graphic oriented materials that I'm going over here. So I would say you could probably do it with acrylic, but it would be a bit of a chore, and there's other ways to do it probably in acrylic, where you wouldn't, you could just get a really fine pen and maybe, or a brush, and kind of get these kind of marks in acrylic paint, which would probably in the end make more sense.
And what
Not to
about,
say that it can't be done, but
yeah, we have another combo question. So
yeah, I love it.
Could you use watercolor to do the background and then use acrylic for the rest of the painting?
Absolutely. And that's a combination. I'm not going to do that today because I just got so many things kind of working at once. But that was one I was like debating that I should do it. That would be one where you would do the watercolor first, like you said, and then probably end with like strong highlights in acrylic. I've always thought that would be a good combination of media. So absolutely, go for it.
Perfect.
I don't see any real problems with that at all. All right, now I'm just going to add. This is a technique here. I'm just going to do this really quick that I didn't show you last time. It's on the list, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of score the paper. This sometimes works, and sometimes it doesn't work as well. So we'll see. So what I'm doing is I'm using, this is a little kebab skewer, a little meat skewer, whatever you want to call them. And I'm just using it to kind of indent the paper before I put any marks down. You can use like, I wouldn't use metal unless it were like rounded, like maybe a knitting needle or something like that. You just want to kind of score the area where you're going to apply the paint. So I'm just going to take a little red here. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work as well. There we go, it's doing all right. And so what this does is it just creates, you see that? It just creates a little bit of a kind of a highlight, a darker highlight, I guess you could say. And the other way this works, and I'll just actually just fill this whole area right here. You can do this while it's damp. This requires a little bit of delicate behavior.
We're out again, Mike, the camera.
Uh-oh. Oh, bad camera.
Just 1 second, guys.
It was being so good yesterday, and now let's just do that. Come
Just
on.
having a day today.
Yeah, it's on weekend hours. Come on. It usually doesn't take this long. It's
We're back.
There's my backyard. Okay. Here we are. Okay, so what I'm doing now here, this is just straight watercolor, and all I'm doing is I'm just taking this wood skewer here and just creating some pattern by indenting into the paper. And in order for it to work like I'm doing it now, this has to be damp. So you can't do this while it's, I mean, you can do it while it's dry. It's just not going to do anything for you other than dig into your paper. All right. Now I'm just going to go rapid fire here, try and finish up some different color variations. Get a little classic watercolor bleed from one color to a next right there. Let's try that. Oh, that color looks great. That is yellow ochre, by the way, which is a wonderful color. So now I'll do it over here too. And you can see that these are waterproof. So they're staying put, all that information up there. Now I've got to watch out for this because I don't want to get too much water in there. Maybe I'll do a nice, really dark blue. Got lots of bright, warmer colors, so I want a little balance here. You can talk a little bit about kind of design ideas. So I'm just going to fill this in with some blue, just to mix it up.
So Mike, as soon as you can, could you show the package of pens again, please?
Yep, sure thing. Yeah, there's lots of them out there. I actually use more than this brand. I use Micron pens, but these work great too. I mean, they're all very similar. I'll just get an edge here. There we go. It's actually starting to look all right. Let's do this. As soon as I get this blue, I'll show those pens. Yeah.
Okay, sure, no problem.
So I had absolutely no agenda with what I was going to do with this image. I'm just sort of filling in gaps and trying to make it interesting. I think it's doing all right. This is.
We have a couple of comments here. Someone says it looks like a face.
A face. Oh yeah, with
Yeah.
sunglasses and a little nose and a little squiggly mouth or something like that.
Yeah, it does.
All right, so those pens, I'll just hold that up right here. Here's the case. This is Staedtler pigment liner, and then the 7, the 5, the 3, and the 1, the different thicknesses. And you can get them in sets of 3, you can get them in sets of 8, and you can get them individually. So you don't have to get 4, but this is a good range of different sizes. So let's just finish. I'm going to get a smaller brush here and maybe do a little bit of.
Hallie says this art style it's kind of like a reminder of the Hungry Caterpillar. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah. Really colorful, big, bold shapes. Yeah, for sure. Now I'm going to try something here. I'm just going to take some real heavy, some heavy yellow over here. And I'm just going to kind of augment this texture. So this is almost straight pigment, very little water. I'm just getting enough water to make it moving on the page when I settle it down. So just kind of adding another layer of yellow to kind of accent what I've already started. Yeah, there we go. And then, you know, combining other media with watercolor can just be as simple as, you know, just drawing in like I did with initially, just sort of drawing in between things and filling in gaps. And you don't have to actually have to combine it with anything else. It can be its own little area of the painting or the drawing. And it can be just, you know, something like that. Just straight up. This is the oil-based colored pencils that I was using earlier. Same thing.
So Mike, while you're doing that, we have a question from Carol. Will you be teaching other classes like, I do not know how to pronounce this, Gouache or something?
Gouache.
Gouache. Thank you. Pastels. What I know that each month is a different medium. So what is like the upcoming months? What will we have?
The next month. So what's happening? So next week we have 2 classes in quick succession. We have Monday and Tuesday class. Those will both be oils. And then we'll kind of go back to once a week. So it won't be like, you know, this week I think we've had 4 or 5 now this week. So then we'll go back to just once a week, every Tuesday. And pretty much for the rest of September, yes, it is entire month of September will be oils. After that, we haven't really decided what we're going to do, but feel free to send through recommendations. You know, if you, I think you get a little chance for feedback or whatever, you know, I would love to see a gouache class, or I'd love to see, you know, acrylic with oil painting over top of it or something like that. So yeah, it's all of mine are going to be painting oriented. So that's the only limitation I have. But feel free to kind of come up with ideas and submit them in any way that you feel like you're able to. But beyond September, we have yet to determine what we're going to do. And maybe if, you know, thematically, it's like working from life, you know, working from direct observation. You know, we might have a few classes where we're working from the imagination or memory or something like that. So it's really kind of an open-ended format. All right, I think I'm gonna call that good. Kind of like it. It's demo drawing painting #1. How about that? I've just named it. And that's what we'll call this one. If people want to hold up theirs, maybe we can have a look real quick. We got a few minutes left.
We have EMA.
Ooh, yeah, cool.
Pretty cool.
Very nice.
Let me see.
That looks great.
Carol.
Yeah, Carol. Okay. I can't see the name in the corner for some. So this is Carol.
That's Carol, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We have Sarah.
Sarah. All right. Sarah, 3rd day in a row.
Yeah.
Awesome. Really nice.
Let me see who else. Kylie.
Yeah. Kylie. Oh, sort of a floral theme. Slightly realistic. Is that supposed to be like a blue potted plant there? That looks great. Beautiful.
And we have Margaret.
Margaret, nice. That looks like Henri Matisse. Looks a little Matisse-esh. If you don't know who that is, look it up. He'll be an instant inspiration for that. That's great. Really nice.
And we have, oops, sorry, it moved on me. Rebecca.
Rebecca. Ooh, yeah. Very nice. Got a
And
little
then,
ink in there as well, or black watercolor, can't tell which, but nice.
then we have Aletha.
Aletha, oh yeah. Got it. That looks
And
really nice.
I think
That
that's
sort of
it.
looks like a still life or something like that. That one had a distinct look to it.
So much talent.
Yeah, that's great. Any more? Any more hanging out there? I see Rebecca Haynes holding hers up. Oh, there's three.
Yeah, we
There's
have
three.
C here. There we
Oh,
go.
yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah,
A triptych.
there we
It's a
go.
triptych. Very nice. Hello. Awesome. Put a little text in there as well. It's awesome.
We have
Wendy.
Jen here as well. I think I haven't.
Oh, yeah, yeah, there. Very nice.
Yeah.
That looks great. Yeah, I mean, these are really easy to just kind of play around with. Just make a few marks and then just go, all right, I'll put this, and you just kind of build it up over time, add a few layers, see how the different combinations go. You can experiment with it. Yeah, lots of possibilities with this one.
I have a couple more here. Sandy.
Yeah, let's see them. We got time. Oh yeah, it's got some real dark ink in it. You must have had that India ink handy. That looks great.
And then Amaya.
Amaya. Oh yeah, very cool. Very nice, Amaya. Excellent work.
It looks like that's it, I think. I hope I didn't miss anyone.
Okay,
Oh, Nancy. Wait, we have Nancy.
Oh, yep, there we go. That's got sort of a geometric look to it, like tiles on a floor or something like that. Very nice.
And Rebecca.
Oh, yeah. Very nice. Nicely done.
And let me
Lots
see.
of cool little techniques from yesterday in that one I could see.
Wendy. We have Wendy here as well.
Oh, Wendy. Very nice, Wendy. Good job. You do that all yourself? Very well done. Good job.
All right, I think that's it.
Yeah, excellent. That looks great. So this is a real, it's kind of a rainy day here today. So this is like a good one where you can just sort of lay a few marks down. Oh, throw that in, see what happens there. Just play around with it. Get used to experimenting with your materials. They're a lot of fun. Lots of different things to try. And there's a lot of stuff that I didn't bring out here that, somebody asked about, alcohol pens and, different, acrylic paint. Try them. The best way to figure this stuff out is to experiment. The worst thing that happens is your paper dissolves into a big puddle of nothing and you're left with that. But, it's not the end of the world. Just try another one, flip it over and try it again on the backside.
Oh my
All
God.
right, folks. Well, that was great. Look at that, 1 o'clock or 8 o'clock, right on time.
Just real quick, I do have a question for you. 2 questions. Could you hold up your final
Yeah.
work of art? And while you do that, we have a question here from Cindy. The acrylic part, class number 4. There was supposed to be like a second part to it. I think that's where the whole confusion came in. Can you talk about that just real fast?
Yes. Oh, that's great. I'm glad you mentioned that because that is what we're going to do next time. So on Monday, the day after tomorrow, I'm going to I still have it taped to the back of this board. So this is what I worked on. I've had this on the back for, I don't know, 3 weeks now. This is what we will begin again on Monday. And this painting is called The Brook at Sunset by George Inness, Inness, American painter of the late 19th century. And we did this in acrylics, and then we're gonna come in with color over top of this in oils. And that will kick off our oil painting session, which we will begin on Monday and all through the month of September. So that's what we're gonna do next class. And I'm glad you mentioned that because it is a continuation of something that maybe a few of you have already done and want to continue. We will do that next time.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mike.
Okay, well, thank you all, folks. Have a great rest of your weekend and hope to see you next time. Take care.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.